We're live.
Great, we're live. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Michael. I
My
am so
pleasure.
excited to have you on the show today. So we first met last month at the Leica New York store opening, and I was so excited to have been introduced to you, but I also knew how busy you were, so I didn't want to just grab you, and bombard you with 500 questions in the corner of the store. So,
Okay. All right.
so that's why I've invited you to come on the show with me today, and I wanted to, for myself and for all the viewers of my show, to demystify the process and some of the misconceptions that photographers might have regarding working with photography or fine art galleries.
Sure. Of course.
So before we dive into a long list of questions that I have prepared for you today, would you mind introducing yourself in terms of your journey leading up to becoming the gallery director for Leica Store New York?
Right. I'm happy to do so. Thank you so much for having me here.
Sure.
And yes, I think one of the goals will be to answer those 500 questions and demystify this whole process. Just a little background about my journey, how I came to Leica after so many years of working in this field. A very long story short, I graduated with a degree in psychology from Boston College.
Wow.
Back in the 80s. And prior to that, in high school, I got a taste of photography by being a yearbook photographer. And one of the things that was startling for me as a teenager was to get assigned to do different things for the yearbook and actually seeing my work published. And that was like an eye-opener because I actually didn't expect that at all. So that was my first taste of photography and like the power of the medium in telling a story. Fast forward, I went out to San Francisco after school. I did a lot of different things, worked at a coffee shop, cleaned houses. Being an artist, you kind of have to piece things together. And while I was doing that, I got to know the people at Frankel Gallery in San Francisco. And one day, literally, they said, "Have you ever thought about working in a gallery?" And I hadn't, because I really identified myself as an artist. I spent 5 years there and
Wow.
learning about, learning how to see, learning how to talk about photography, learning how to curate. They were very open and supportive in teaching, even though that wasn't the intention of going there. But I often feel like I got my graduate degree from Frankel U because I learned so much there, working with Hiroshi Sugimoto, Lee Freelander, Gary Winogrand, Bob Adams, and working, not only seeing their work and talking about their work, but also speaking to them about what it's like to be a photographer, how they make their work. And so that was great. And then from there, I worked for several different galleries in San Francisco. I moved to New York, and I started working for Howard Greenberg Gallery, and then moved on to Yancey Richardson Gallery, where I was the director for 4 years and thoroughly enjoyed that. And that really put me in really kind of front and center in representing the gallery, representing the artists, and working with clients. And so in 2004, I just decided either I'm going to continue to work for galleries and, just kind of keep doing that, or I'm going to do my own thing. And so that's when I decided to do my own thing and give it a shot in 2004. And then after 19 years,
Wow.
and the offer came to me from Leica. And it was, as I say, it was like, it's an offer I couldn't refuse. And I saw the potential. I saw all the things that could be possible by not only working with a gallery, but working with Leica. Leica has 28 galleries worldwide. That's an incredible network and a long history. So that's when I took the position, just actually last July. So I've been here less than a year. and I'm the gallery director of the Leica store and gallery in the Meatpacking District.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And I've also heard about that Leica currently has the largest network of galleries worldwide. Can you talk about the significance of that in the photo industry?
Well, I mean, it works on so many levels in a positive way. One is that, well, a lot of it is just logistics. Like if a show in Barcelona opens up that I'm interested in, and then it goes to Kyoto, then it can come to New York, and we can kind of move that around. And so that network can be very self-supportive in doing exhibition, because you think there are 28 galleries, there's going to be some overlap, or at least wouldn't it be great to do a Salgado show that travels? And that's easy to do within that gallery network. And I think for people coming into the stores or the galleries, that there's a certain excitement of maybe where they live, there's a Leica store or a gallery, Leica store and gallery. And then they come to New York and they're like, oh, I want to check out the Leica store and gallery in New York, because I know what it looks like in Melbourne, but I wonder what it looks like in New York City, especially the new one, which is so attractive. So there's something about the continuity of that, I think, for people not only that are interested in the cameras and the tools that we offer, but also what's going on in the gallery and how they differ, but yet how they're really kind of consistent and cohesive.
Definitely. And I'm definitely one of those customers. I'm an avid Leica user, a huge Leica fan. But when I do travel to a new city, I always make sure to look up to see if there's a Leica store in that city. And I try my best to visit the store when I can and check out the gallery and all the art in the store as well.
All right. Because there's a continuity, but they're different. And that's the exciting part.
Exactly. Definitely. Well, thank you so much for your introduction. So why don't we dive into the questions, the long list of questions.
All right. I feel like I'm on a game show. Go ahead. Let's go. Spin the wheel. So my first question is, what is the role of a gallery to an artist other than just a place to exhibit their artwork? I think it's twofold, and I think a lot of it depends on the gallery and the gallerist. But I will tell you, how I see myself here. So working with the artist, an artist can differ in how much agency they want to give the gallerist. In other words, they may have a set body of work. They have very clear ideas of what they'd like to do. They know what their edit should look like. They even know how they want it on the wall. But I find that a lot of them, and I think this is a good thing, turn over part of that to the gallerist and really form a collaboration, because we all know sometimes, whether we're a writer and we rely on an editor, or we're a photographer and we rely on an editor, that sometimes a point of view from outside of our work is so important really to the true development of work, because we can have favorites. We could go to Shanghai and make this photograph and have a memory of who we were with and the smell and the light and the heat. But sometimes in a photograph that doesn't convey. And so we attach ourselves emotionally to some photographs that may not be as good as we think they are, even though they're important to us. So I think the role of a gallerist and myself is to come in and point that out and to guide that artist in looking at their work from a little distance. So that's one thing for sure that I love and relish to do, because I like to create too. And so I like to see that body of work. I like to maybe carve out a different selection and then present the work in a way that really tells a story and makes sense in the gallery visually, because that kind of editing and sequencing, which a lot of artists are familiar with, maybe it's on their website, maybe they're self-publishing a book or have another book, that sequence and order can be really, really important into how we see the work. And the first role is talking about size, because for most photographers, not most, but many, they haven't really printed their work in a way that's kind of exhibition ready. And so how big do I make my work? Like, how, what kind of paper do I use? How do I frame it? How do I present it? What's the price? should I addition the work? Should I have 10 sizes or 2 sizes? So there are all these kind of decisions that I think a gallerist, including myself, can help suggest ways to proceed in that. Because listen, artists, photographers out there making work, that's their thing. I'm not over their shoulder saying, no, go a little left, you make it, that's your baby. But then you come here and I have to kind of interpret, distill it, and curate it in a way that makes sense to a viewership that may not be familiar with you or your work.
Definitely, and I could definitely see how your background in psychology really helps with that, right? Because
sit on my couch here.
You're like the translator between the artist and the audience, right? You're translating the photographer's vision so that it caters to the local audience, or something.
I mean, it's almost like a translation, or it's a translation, but and just to make the vision like you're talking about, which the photographer owns, is to help that on the walls of the gallery, and this kind of in several ways. And we've all seen exhibitions that kind of visually don't make sense, or the prints are too small, they're too big, or they're in a frame that doesn't work, or the sequence is weird. So all of those things I think really help streamline the presentation for an artist. Right,
definitely. Okay, so how important is it professionally for emerging artists to get his or her work into a gallery? Should that be their like sole mission?
No, I think it's.
I don't know if this question makes sense.
No, I know it does, and I think I listen, in every entertainment, in every industry that involves entertainment or talent in some way, whether you're a musician or you're an actor, you're a writer, we as artists can do so much on our own and get our work out, whether it's Instagram or whatever. I mean, there was a time when the gallery, or let's just say musically too, like the record label, were the gatekeepers. They made choices and decisions as to what is popular, what is heard, what is seen, and not. Same with radio stations. When radio stations were the only source of new material, if you will, galleries were the same. Where else were you going to see contemporary photography? I mean, there were magazines and some books, but the exhibition was kind of they were the gatekeeper. They were the ones that made you or didn't make you. And there are critics and other people that got involved with that. But now I think the photographer has so many other platforms and tools to use on their own, that searching for a gallery and being in a gallery should, in my mind, should not be the be all and end all. In other words, if it comes and when it comes, celebrate it and take advantage of that for sure. There's nothing like walking into the gallery here at Leica and seeing your work up on the wall. I mean,
definitely.
That's cool. That's a lot better than posting 10 images from your trip. So there's some validation there, which is still true, right? There's some validation, like you're here, you're in this gallery in New York City, and that's awesome. However, that should not be the make it or break it.
Okay, got it.
Important, yes, but it's just one outlet for you.
Understood. Yep. And the reason I asked that is because I graduated with a degree in photography, and back in school, they made it seem like, if I don't get a gallery to represent me and my work, then it will be a struggle. But then, like you said, there are so many other platforms out there nowadays that maybe being in the gallery shouldn't be my sole mission, like I could find other ways of promoting myself and my work today.
Absolutely. And from doing that, you will get more noticed by a gallery, right? So that's
very true.
They all can work together.
Exactly.
Sometimes a gallery comes first, a book comes first, you have a YouTube channel, you have whatever you have. And then somebody, say a gallery, takes note, and they're like, hey, let's do a gallery show. Right.
Definitely. Okay, so in terms of photography, what type of work is suitable for a gallery?
For Leica or just in general?
Right. I was gonna say that for Leica, I know Leica does a lot of street photography, portraiture, but I think why don't we start with like in general, what type of photo type of work is suitable for a gallery, and what type of work is more suitable for a Leica gallery.
Okay. Well, I would say for in general, and I don't have my list in front of me, but I usually have like 5 or 6 criteria where I had my gallery, what I looked at. And there was a lot of things. And this is more about kind of artist gallery relationship. And that is, first of all, do I like the work? Okay. So that has to be a connection there. Can I sell the work? Do I think I have clients for it? Does the work look like other work in that gallery? And the way I see that is like, when you see other artists in that gallery, other photographers, do they look like, first cousins? Or do they not look like they resemble you at all? So that might not be the place. And at the same time, you don't want them looking like your twin brother because you're too similar. Right? The gallery wants to kind of diversify. And the point for that is, do I think I can sell it? That is, I think, probably a big part of what a gallery will think about when they're thinking about choosing photography. Outside of like the type of styles, right? Like, so certain photography galleries may have certain style of work they show. Maybe they show just vintage work or more established artists. Maybe they show more contemporary. So there's that good fit. But at the end of the day, the gallery world, it's a business. And you have a store. If you have, if you're not an online gallery, you actually have a real gallery, you have a store, you have overhead, you have payroll, you have expenses and everything else. So you're bringing this item in, and any other shopkeeper, no matter who they are, will tell you, I'm not going to put something on I know this sounds a little debasing of art, but it's not, because it's real. But a shopkeeper of any type is not going to bring a product in and put it out if they don't think they at least have a chance of selling it. Right. And it also has to fit into their thing. Like, so when you go into particular stores, you have certain expectations. So it has to feel like it fits, and that's important. Leica, and the way we look at it, yes, there's portrait and street photography, but there's not a mandate for me to only show Leica photographers or only show well-known blue chip photographers, if you will. It's we're interested in showing good work. We're interested in showing work that tells a story. We're interested in work that is somehow reflective of our current times or another part of our history. So and it goes deep. Most of the work is deep. We're not going to probably do a show of like beautiful flowers, like photographers that shoot flowers, and that's great. And I'm sure there are galleries that will do that, but that's not really telling the deep story that we want to tell. And that's it. And I mean, if you're shooting a Leica or you're doing that type of work, great, but it's not exclusive to that. I don't want to show, I don't think any Leica gallery wants to show the same style of work all the time. We really look to diversify, and the program is young. We're still on our first exhibition of Elliot Erwitt. So, and then our next exhibition is Ismail Ferdas, who was the Lobo winner of the Oscar Barnack Award this past year. He's Bangladeshi by birth, but lives in Brooklyn, and he won that award. And work is very different. It's contemporary work that he photographed on Cox's Bazaar, which is a beach in the Bay of Bengal. And visually speaking, it's very different than Elliot Erwitt. So I like the diversity of work, but like Ismail's work, it tells a story. That's important for us.
So my takeaway from that is perhaps a photographer should have a better understanding of different gallery styles and what they look for before they actually approach them.
It sounds overused advice, but do your research. Do not waste your time or the other people's time if your work just seems really incompatible or not the kind of work that will be championed by that gallery. Because as a gallery looks at your work, you need to look at the work of that gallery. If it doesn't feel appropriate, good fit, I don't care how popular the gallery is,
Right.
It's probably not the one that's going to support you in the way you want to be supported.
Right. Definitely.
Uh,
So how does an artist get his or her work into a gallery? Like, can we just go up to them and be like, "Hey, can you take my work?"
oh,
Or do
absolutely.
we
And
just
sometimes
pray to
we
God that they'll find us?
no, and sometimes we like give them shows right there and then. We're like, get your work out of the portfolio. We're going to put it up there right now. I wish it were that easy. I mean, there are a lot of ways to go about it, but in my experience in this business, obviously the work has to speak. The work is important, no matter how connected you are, no matter how many, if you know the gallery owner, etc. If the work is not there, so that is something you can work on. You do that. I have no control over that. Outside of that, it's about building relationships.
Yeah.
And it is about, I think, a longer term courtship, if you will, for the particular gallery that you're interested in. So let's say you are interested in the Leica gallery. Well, it'd be helpful if you had been to some of our events. If you're in town, maybe you're not in town, I get that. But if you are, maybe you've been to some of the events, maybe you introduce yourself. Maybe when you write to us or write to any gallery, whether it's Leica or otherwise, maybe you talk about the gallery first and not just yourself. Because I want to know that you know who I am, but more importantly, what the gallery is and what we show.
Exactly.
If it's all about you, and when I have my gallery, I sat at the front desk and I could tell people come make a beeline. They open the door and make a beeline right to the desk. Are you looking at new work? Or I'm in from Europe for a couple days. Can I show you some work? And I'm like, first of all, do you even know where you are? Do you even know what the name of this gallery is? And have you even looked at one piece of artwork on my wall? And you want to show with me? So that's obviously a huge turnoff, but that happens all the time, or we get a generic. So to me, it's trying to create a relationship with the gallery on their terms, and then you follow up. The job I got at Frankel Gallery, I was not looking for that job. I just got to know them. I didn't even think that I would ever work there, and then they got to know me. And then boom, literally out of the blue, asked me. So
very naturally.
Very natural, because we already had a shared experience together. And if you can do that, then with whether you're a local gallery or you travel, I that's the way to do it, because we're people after all.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
We have a relationship. This is not, you're not submitting on a Google form. And I look it over,
Right, definitely. So how much work should a photographer have in his or her portfolio before they decide to approach a gallery?
Well, I think in part it depends on the nature of the project. Some artists just work on projects, or let's say they're a street photographer, for instance, right? There may not be a project beginning and end. It might just be continuous work, or there might be a project. But if there is a project, and that is something that has a beginning and end, then I would say you should have 20 to 25 pictures, at least. Because if you're thinking about a book, 20 or 25 pictures is not big enough for a book. Usually, maybe for a show catalog, but not a book. So you want to have, and here's the challenge with that. You think you have 20 or 25, you probably don't. So artists always think they have, they're a little bit more than they really do. And you start to look at either some of the work is really repetitive, starts to become repetitive, or it just is, they're too personally connected with it, and it's really not as good as they think it might be. And when I say I don't mean I like it, I don't like it, but that it's really contributing to the story they're trying to tell. So that's it. But I would say I would not approach a gallery unless you have 20 solid pieces that are somehow cohesive and tied together.
Okay. Can we talk about the responsibilities between the artist and the gallery? Like who's responsible for what, the printing, framing, shipping,
Right.
paying the work, etc.
So in general, I would say that the artist is responsible for any kind of production. So printing of the work. For most cases, the artist should assume that they will be responsible for the framing or presentation of the work. Then when that work gets handed over and visual files are handed over, JPEGs or TIFFs or whatever, then the gallery takes over responsibility. So then the gallery will write the press release. They should have the artworks on their website. They will install the work, and that might be in conjunction with the artist. Sometimes the artist may come and they talk about it. Sometimes they agree on a layout. Sometimes the artist will have nothing to do with that aspect. So once the work gets transferred, it should be ready to hang, and that will be on the artist. Obviously, there's some exceptions to that, but generally speaking, that should be what an artist expects. And then it's in the gallery's interest and the artist's interest, but the gallery's interest to sell and represent the work, to make sure that the exhibition is listed, making sure that there's Instagram posts or other social media platforms that support the exhibition. It's in their best interest to try to sell the work, to get as many people as they can in there, to do some sort of related event. Like for Ismail, we're going to have a conversation with James Welford from the National Geographic. That'll be the day after the opening. And for the grand opening here for Elliot Erwitt, we have a panel discussion. So there's some supplemental programming involved, not just the opening reception, which is all fine and a party, but something that supplements the exhibition, so you can talk more about it and then bring people in again. Sometimes galleries have closing exhibitions, so it's another way, closing party. So it's another way to bring people in. So it's up to collaboratively, really, the gallery and the artist to promote the exhibition, but a lot of it does fall upon the gallery.
Gotcha. So I've personally have worked with a few galleries myself, and I know some of them could be quite particular. Can you talk about, in terms of like the preferred paper types or the frames to use, or does that matter at all?
No, I mean, I think that, I think the paper type, you obviously want to make your pictures look great. So whatever paper makes them look great, then that's the paper to use.
Gotcha. But there's not like a specific brand, like you must use this Epson whatever. And
no, I just want to make sure it doesn't look cheap. Sometimes I personally, like if sometimes someone uses a satin finish or a pearl, like sometimes there's a texture on the paper and it feels and looks very plasticky. But on the other hand, sometimes artists feel they want to use absolute matte paper, very fibrous paper where the ink really gets sucked in, but then you lose all shadow detail, and the surface has no kind of energy, if you will. So be mindful about not being too arty, but flat paper looks best for your work, then use it. Framing is another consideration, but more important, I think, than your paper is, because that's the vessel, that's the container that you're going to present this in. And think about containers and presentation. It's so super important. You go into like a very nice restaurant versus a diner, and your silverware is presented differently. Everything is different, and that should reflect the highest quality possible. And that doesn't mean the most expensive, but it means a framing, I would say vessel or a container that supports the work but doesn't get in the way of the work. And that is the trade-off. There are multiple ways to do it. You can obviously mat your work, put it in a frame. You can mount it and just kind of put it on the wall and it juts out a little bit. You can do face mounting. Like there's so many ways to present it, but you want to make congruent with your subject matter and your style. Elliot Erwitt, classic black and white, some street photographs, some portraits, small prints. We have a 30-40, but most are 16 by 20. So we just went with a traditional matte and a black frame. That's the way that for me works best.
Gotcha.
So you have to find the frame that will support but not get in the way
Right.
of your work. And it doesn't have to be that expensive either.
Right.
You can do it reasonably.
Right, definitely, as long as it doesn't take away from the work itself, right?
It can't. Do not fall in love with some decorative frame or some French matte, double matte colors and it's just anything that feels like it's getting in the way of the work.
Right, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. Can you talk about print editions, what that means, and how does a photographer decide how many editions for their prints or their body of work?
Right. Well, what I find is a lot of photographers have never had a need to edition their work. So a lot of them printing different sizes and maybe selling them, without an edition. But when you start to work with a gallery, unless you're Elliot Erwitt, who really never editioned his work, so whatever there is, and that's it.
Right.
But you're editioning your work, and listen, Hiroshi Sugimoto is a pretty well-known photographer. His early work, the seascapes and the theaters, were editioned at 25. It's kind of a lot. He started doing the work in the late 70s, so 25 seems like a lot, and it probably was more of the norm, a couple decades ago. But now you're looking at definitely under 10.
Under 10, wow, okay.
Oh, yeah, I think under 10. So I think the first thing you have to do when you think about editions, you have to think about size. Okay. So there's one of two ways to go. One way is that each print has its own size. In other words, think about a painter. Like usually when you see a painting show, usually they're different size canvases, right? So sometimes subject matter works better in a small canvas. Sometimes you want a big, magnificent canvas, right? So if a photographer thinks that way, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it, that each print, like, this still life of a flower, it really has to be 20 by 24. It can't be any smaller. And so you make that still life of a flower 20 by 24, period. That's it. Mm-hmm. No more sizes. More than likely, because we're, kind of subjected to manufacturer's paper size and boxes of paper, like we always have been. Like when I was printing, there was 8 by 10, 11 by 14, 16 by 20. Often you made all your prints the same size. Right. Just that was the way it worked, right? But that's fine. But if you don't do like the single size for each image, then I would say, well, what sizes does my work in general look best at? And I would choose two sizes. I would choose one size that's on the smaller side and one side that's on the bigger side. And you could do, for instance, a 16 by 20 and a 30 by 40. So there's different enough between the two sizes, so you're not doing 16 by 20 and 2024, which are like super close. You want to distinguish between those sizes. So once you determine your sizes, then you do the addition.
Gotcha. So would the different sizes be part of the same edition, or I think that's very complex, and I don't like it. Nan Golden used to do that. So Nan Golden would print in 20 by 24 and 30, 40. I think her edition was 15, but that edition could be 10 30 by 40s and 5 20 by 24s. Like, it depends on what people bought. And I thought, wait a minute, so maybe there's only one 30 by 40 from this particular image just because of the way people bought it. Right. So I don't like that at all. Each size should have its own edition. And the rule of thumb is the bigger the print, the smaller the edition. So something, if you did a 16 by 20 and a 30 40, for instance, you could make the 30 40 edition of 5 and the 16 by 20 edition of 10. Gotcha. Okay.
That would be one example that would make a lot of sense.
Right. And I'm assuming that we're keeping the edition numbers down so that they're more rare, or so to speak.
Yeah, photography is, that's why many photographers through the history of the medium never printed a lot of work, because there was not a demand to sell their work.
Right.
So it's like, if you come into my exhibition and I say, if I Elliot Erwitt, and they're like, well, how many are printed? I'm like, well, he just prints, on demand. That's not a very sexy sales feature, It's like, so he could print hundreds of these. I'm like, well, technically, yeah, he could.
Right.
And Elliot has passed now, so whatever is printed is available. There's no posthumous print, so there's a little leverage there, because you're buying something that definitely will disappear.
Right.
So when you have editions, it adds incentive to buy the medium. And when you go to a painting show, it's like one painting. It's like, that's it. Either it's yours or it's not yours, right?
Exactly.
So if there's not incentives, then it's harder for people to commit early.
Right.
And you want to build incentive to do that. It's just like, Leica, I think they're waiting lists for everything. It's just, and then when they do special editions of a camera, sometimes it's like 200 pieces.
Exactly.
And that's it. And they sell out almost immediately. But if Leica was forever making, the Q3 or the SL3 forever, they're just kind of eternally making them, there might not be the same level of passion initially when we release a new product like that. So between the cameras that are just the regular editions and the special edition, it builds excitement, anticipation. It moves people to take action sooner. And this is true with the gallery as well.
Right. Definitely. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I am going to segue our conversation into something that I know a lot of photographers are very uncomfortable talking about. Can you talk about?
Maybe I will be too. I don't know. What is it?
Can you talk about the profit split between the artist and the gallery, and the process that goes behind, an artwork when it's sold? Is the gallery responsible for shipping the artwork to the buyer, or are they doing the negotiations, or?
Oh, okay. So you want to know? You want to talk about pricing? Is that part of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So
Definitely.
If you haven't really priced your work, the gallerist will helpfully aid you in doing that. And I'm going to speak generally now, just not about Leica, but each gallery has a personality, and that is reflective in the work. It's reflective on the size of the space, the neighborhood, how long they've been in business, etc. So you could put this beautiful sculpture of a water bottle in one gallery, and it would be priced at $100. You could move that same sculpture in another gallery that is a lot higher end, and it would be priced at $10,000. So it's the same object, but the context and the perception is very different. And that's a weirdish thing about artwork, is that the perception and the context is really important. So if you haven't had a lot of experience pricing your work, and then you have a gallery exhibition, the pricing probably should reflect other pricing that's in that gallery, because that would make sense. So I find it's often a collaborative conversation between the gallerist and the artist. And the gallerist needs to have it priced not too low so it seems too cheap, but not too high so that they won't sell any work. And the challenge is, if you put your artwork in a gallery and you sell it, price it at $1,000, and you don't sell it, it's going to be hard then to lower the price the next time. You're like, oh, okay, well, I'll lower the price the next gallery show. Well, that's weird.
Right.
I just saw this artwork for $1,000 here. Now all of a sudden it's $500. So what are you going to lower to $250 next year? That's not good. So you have to be mindful about do not price too high, because you can always go up. Coming down is a lot harder. So you're collaborating with the gallery on that price. The gallerist has to feel they can sell it for that price, and they also have to feel it's not too cheap looking, and it's not too expensive to scare people away. If you're on the newer side of being discovered, if no one knows your name. So that's it. Generally speaking, the gallery is split 50-50. So it's $1,000 print. You sell it for $1,000, you get $500, I get $500. Now, there are discounts involved often.
Right.
So someone come in and say, well, I really like that. I want to get 3, but will you give it to me instead of $1,000 each? Can I have each one for $850 each if I buy 3?
Right.
And you and the artist need to have those conversations before that happens, so that the gallerist can be like, I can do that, I can't do that. Because the last thing you want to do is for a gallery is to discount work and then call the artist and tell them you discounted it, but you didn't have that conversation.
Right.
So clarity and communication is king. So agree on that. Agree that what the price is, and agree on what kind of discount, what kind of latitude can be given, and you split that discount. So if you're selling it for $900 instead of $1,000, you get it's still 50-50, and you also have to agree upon that. So pricing can get a little sticky and weird if you don't talk about it. But if you talk about it, then there shouldn't be a problem. Right,
definitely.
And then to answer the other question about shipping, that is the gallery's responsibility. 9 times out of 10, the client will pay for that. Sometimes the gallery will offer that as incentive if they want to kind of close a deal on a print. They may say, I'll include the shipping in on that. And then they absorb that. They don't pass it on to the artist. It's not 50-50. But I will say that generally speaking, an artist does, they are responsible for getting the work to the gallery.
Okay.
So if they're living in California, they want to show in New York, generally speaking, they're going to have to pay for that shipping and maybe shipping back. But again, that's the thing you have to discuss with your gallery ahead of time, so there's no weird confusion at the end of the show. And the artist thinks the gallery is paying for it, and the gallery thinks the artist is paying for it, and then it's terrible.
Right, definitely. Okay, so in terms of a photographer's portfolio, do galleries prefer them to be traditional, like physical portfolios, or online when a photographer approaches a gallery, or does it not matter?
I think online is fine. We're so used to consuming images online, and I think that is a fine way to begin. But I just had an artist who reached out to me through other channels in Leica and came in yesterday, and I looked at the work. I looked at the work because they had printed little, like 5, I think they're actually 4x6 prints of the portfolio. So it was like literally like pulled out of a bag, and I looked at them, and that was really good because at the end of the day, the gallery is selling objects and not images. So it can be really important, especially if your print, and most artists think this, but if their prints are absolutely beautiful and they need to be seen in person, I get it. But a starting point for me is always a digital presentation, because I can get whether or not it's even in the range that I'm looking for.
Right.
And then I will look at the prints.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. How about photo competitions and awards and stuff like that? How important is that in the gallery's decision on whether or not they want to work with an artist?
I think those things are nice, but in my mind, they're not needed. They're not needed in order to convince the gallerist that they should take you on or give you an exhibition. I mean, they're always great when other people have filtered the work for you in a way, when other people have vetted that work And that could be the form of a grant that you received, or a competition you won, or maybe you have an MFA from, a school that's recognizable or not.
Right.
So there are some things out there that help support you and your work, but it's not going to be, okay, I have this on my resume, so this should be a shoe-in. But what it does show me, especially if you have a bit of a record, is that you're committed. That you've entered the competition, you've applied for the grants, you've done these residencies, you have gotten this award. So it tells me that you're really in this, and this is important to you because you've done work. So that's what I would say. So helpful, yes. Is it gonna, push you over? I don't think so.
Right. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Can you also talk about the artist statement? Like what it is, like how important is it, and must all photographers have this prepared when approaching a gallery?
Absolutely. Because I'm going to have a conversation with you about your work. And I don't want to hear it should speak for itself.
Right.
That's not true. So artist statement's super important because, one, I think it helps you understand your work a little more. Because a lot of times we're just out there shooting. We're just making pictures, or we're responding. Sometimes just like intuitively, subconsciously. We don't even exactly know why. And then you have to reflect, and you have to start to see what brings all this work together. What are your themes? What are your interests? What do you avoid? If we organize a photo walk and we walk down the street here on 13th to the High Line and stuff, everyone would be taking different types of pictures. And I want to know why. Why didn't you photograph that peeling paint on the cobblestone? Well, that interests me. I like people. Oh, okay, great. Well, let's talk about that a little bit and the difference. So you have to be able to have a flow of talking about your work, and writing it down is important. And then also, I'm writing a press release, so I'm not making stuff up.
Right.
I don't want to totally interpret your work 100% and make stuff up. Right. And you're like, no, that's not why I'm making the work,
Right.
But
right.
I'm like, well, I didn't know you didn't say anything about your work. I have to write something, and then a client comes in and they'll say, tell me about this work. I don't know this artist, and where am I going to get that information from? From you. Right. And I will, as a curator, I may contextualize it. I may put it in the place of history, or align you with other artists that feel like you're simpatico with. But I'm not going to make stuff up.
Right.
So that's important to have that conversation. And the artist statement is simple. I mean, there's a few no-nos. You don't want to use you don't want to do I don't think you should do third person. Like if someone else is speaking about you, you should do first person. Don't use any kind of technical terms. Don't use the word like a word indexical. Like this was a word that was used. I saw it in so many press releases about 5 years ago. I'm like, where did this word come from? Everyone is writing about it. So use words that we understand in a conversation. And you have to answer 3 questions. It's simple. What are you doing? What are you doing? I'm a street photographer in New York City, and I'm photographing people in sports uniforms. That's what I'm doing. I see them on the street, and boom, I capture them. That's what I do. So why are you doing that? Well, my dad actually is a partial owner in the Seattle. I don't know if the team is out there. Philadelphia Phillies, and he's a part owner. I grew up in baseball, and I'm like, the jerseys have changed over time, and I don't think people understand that. And I really want to show how those jerseys have changed. So that's the why. Why are you doing that? Why are you interested in that? And then how? Well, I'm doing it in black and white. I'm shooting actually with a Holga camera, and because I want to get an abstract quality. And so it's what, why, how. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? It's important. And how are you doing it? So if your statement can answer those 3 things, then you've written a great artist statement. Rather than starting from a blank piece of paper or an empty Word document and writing from scratch, just like, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And how am I doing that? And that will distinguish you from other people that are doing street photography. For instance.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, there you go.
Are there resources where maybe it's like a service that, someone could proofread your artist statement, or somewhere online that we could learn more about how to craft the best artist statement?
Well, I think there are. I mean, certainly you could just dial up AI and they could probably jolt something out for you. But there are plenty of workshops, that I've seen on writing an artist statement, because I think for visual artists, that's really one of the hardest things.
For sure.
That, or to talk about your work, I think that's also a hard thing.
For sure.
Because we our language is visual. And now you're asking to write about it. Like, I'm not a writer. But if you answer those questions, and if you just Google like artist statement class, I'm sure there's something there that might work for you. It could be already like a preset class, one that just has modules and you just kind of work on it. Others might be more interactive. I would keep it short, like I would have two versions. One is like 150 words, 200 words, and then one would be a little bit longer than that if you want to dive into maybe personal history a little bit.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, but we just want to get, as a reader, we just want to get a flavor of like why you're doing this work, and is there anything interesting, like this guy, like this made up person that his father owns part of the Philadelphia Phillies, he grew up in baseball, this and that, like that's interesting, right? So if you include something that's personal, your personal connection to your subject, and not everybody has that, and that's okay, but if you do, that's something that definitely should enter that statement.
Right. Got it.
It's part of your story, and we want to hear about that.
Definitely. Wow. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure. I hope I passed.
Huge list of questions. So that's about all the questions I've prepared for you today.
Okay.
Do you have anything else you would like to add in addition to this conversation before we close this?
There's a lot of things that could be said, but first of all, thank you for having me here and connecting.
Thank you so much.
I love to share this information because I do think that the gallery world in general, whether it's Leica or somewhere else, it is a bit of a, and the entry point, the doors to get in, if you will, sometimes are not clear and apparent. So I think this is an important conversation to have.
Definitely.
But I will say that if you are committed to this medium, to making work, to telling a story, to diving deep, and you do it in a consistent way, eventually, whatever platform that you're you're supposed to be on, whether it's a gallery, a book, a podcast, whatever it is, it will find you. You will find it, and the audience will find you. I guarantee it. And I believe that it's a long haul. I started as a book photographer, and I never this life that I have, I could not even have imagined that, because I just wouldn't even know the steps to take. But I just kept doing what I like to do, what I love to do, and I was honest and made the right connections, sometimes just accidentally. And then it led me here. So it's a journey. Don't get too wigged out if things don't happen right away. And build relationships, because people love to work with people they know and like. And that alone opens up a lot of possibilities. So be mindful of that and don't get anxious about it.
Definitely make lots of connections, right? And attend gallery exhibits and shows.
Gallery openings, panels, do your research, go see exhibitions, inform yourself so you can have conversations about art and photography, and be seen.
Right. Definitely. Well, thank you so much again for joining me today. I am going to leave Michael's contact information on screen here. If you guys have any questions or would like to be represented maybe by Michael's gallery, you could contact him here. But do keep in mind in your subject line, maybe you can mention something about having seen the show, and that's why you're contacting him. So he could pay more attention to your message. And I'm sure Michael gets so many messages a day, probably.
Just it's a way to distinguish yourself.
Right.
It would be really helpful for me.
Definitely. And if any of you have questions, feel free to leave a comment below this video, and I personally go through all the comments. And if you have questions for Michael, I'll definitely reach back out to Michael and maybe we could answer these questions for you. Well, thank you so much again, Michael. It's been such a pleasure. And I hope we could do this again next time.
Absolutely. I look forward to your next visit. Oh, no, it's fine. It's been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.